Putin was smiling cheerfully in Moscow while the rubble of a children's hospital destroyed by a Russian missile was being cleared in Kyiv. This is how journalist BILD Rene Hartske commented on the reception of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Moscow. He arrived in the Russian capital at the very moment when a Russian missile destroyed the Okhmatdyt Children's Hospital in Kyiv. Terror in Kyiv, and Putin smiles, Hartske wrote under a photo of the Russian dictator's meeting with the Indian Prime Minister. During his two-day visit to Russia, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for an early end to the war in Ukraine, but he also believes that it is impossible to find a solution on the battlefield and that only dialogue is needed, NDTV reports.
India has always called for respect for the UN Charter, including territorial integrity and sovereignty. There is no solution on the battlefield. Dialogue and diplomacy are the way forward.
In addition, the Indian Prime Minister also expressed concern about his citizens, who were deceived by unscrupulous travel agents into joining the Russian army. The newspaper also reported that Russia had pledged to repatriate all the victims. And NDTV added, and I quote, "This is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Russia since the country started the war in Ukraine, and after he returned to power last month, for a record third term. Since then, India has shied away from directly condemning Russia and abstained from UN resolutions critical of Moscow." As for Zelensky's reaction to the meeting between Putin and Modi, I would like to remind you that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reacted to the visit of the Indian Prime Minister to a Russian terrorist. He recalled that on the day he arrived in Moscow, Russian missiles killed 37 people, 3 of them were children, and another 170 people were injured.
A Russian missile hit the largest children's hospital in Ukraine, targeting young cancer patients. Many were buried under the rubble. It is a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's largest democracy embrace the world's bloodiest criminal in Moscow on a day like this.
U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said that the U.S. had expressed its concern to India about its relations with Russia amid Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This was reported by Reuters. As noted, the West has called on India to distance itself from Russia, but New Delhi has always said that it cannot do so because of its long-standing economic ties with Moscow. On his first visit to Russia since the outbreak of the full-scale Russian-Ukrainian war, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that this meeting would, quote, certainly be of great importance for the future strengthening of ties and friendship between the two countries. End of quote. And the U.S. State Department spokesperson stressed that the U.S. would take into account Modi's public statements.
As I said, we have made clear to India our concerns about ties with the Russian Federation. Therefore, we hope that India, like any other country, if they cooperate with Russia, will make it clear that it must respect the UN Charter, respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Viktor Orban, the Hungarian minister in charge of the EU presidency, did not warn the European Commission about his plans to visit China and did not talk about the outcome of the visit. European Commission spokesman Eric Mamer said this at a briefing in Brussels. According to European Pravda, at the briefing, the spokesperson was asked whether the Hungarian Prime Minister had warned the European Commission about his plans to visit Beijing, whether he had told them what was discussed at his meeting with Xi Jinping, and whether the European Commission had tried to find out these details.
The answer to all 3 questions is no. There was no contact before the trip. There was no explanation after that.
The European Commission noted that the essence of mediation in a conflict is that both sides entrust the mediator with such a role, while in the case of Viktor Orban's peacekeeping mission, it is more like his own initiative. According to European Pravda, this was stated by the European Commission's chief spokesperson, Eric Mamer, at a daily briefing, and a journalist from the Chinese publication asked why there was such a strong reaction to Orban's peacekeeping mission and why not give the Hungarian leader a chance to achieve some success.
You talk about mediation, but when it comes to mediation, it implies that both parties ask you to be a mediator. This is embedded in the very concept of mediation. As far as I know, none of the parties, at least Ukraine, asked him to mediate.
Secondly, there is a very simple way to end this war started by Russia. It is necessary for Russia to stop it, he recalled. The spokesman also recalled that the EU supports the peace formula process initiated by Ukraine, which aims to achieve a just and sustainable peace. Let me remind you that a number of European leaders have once again criticized Viktor Orban's peacekeeping visit to Moscow. And the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, stressed that Viktor Orban has no mandate to engage with Russia on behalf of the EU. The EU's chief diplomat also stressed that the Hungarian Prime Minister's visit is taking place exclusively within the framework of bilateral relations between Hungary and Russia. Orban himself claimed that Hungary had no mandate to negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia. Meanwhile, the main opponent of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Peter Magyar, will visit Kyiv on Wednesday, the 10th of July. The visit will take place because of the Russian shelling of the Okhmatdyt Children's Hospital, the politician said on Facebook.
As a parent, I can't do otherwise. Yesterday's horrific Russian missile attack shocked everyone. No child fights. There's nothing they can do about it. They didn't even have a chance to live.
Politico notes that the Hungarian Prime Minister, who has refused to break relations with Vladimir Putin despite the Russian ruler's full-scale war against Ukraine, has been on a renegade diplomatic mission in recent days, visiting Kyiv, Moscow and Beijing to discuss the conflict while Hungary holds the EU presidency for 6 months. In February, Magyar, a former apparatchik of Orban's Fidesz party and a qualified lawyer, stood up to his former partner. He founded a social movement that evolved into the Party of Respect and Freedom, which won almost 30% in the European Parliament elections, the strongest result for an opposition party in Hungary in 15 years. Its 7 MEPs have joined the centre-right European People's Party and, according to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, the attack on Okhmatdyt, one of Kyiv's oldest children's hospitals, left 2 people dead and more than 30 injured.
Magyar condemned the attack in a post on social media, while only Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó spoke out from the Orban government, referring to the Prime Minister's peaceful mission and the danger of escalation, but without mentioning Russia or its aggressive role in the conflict.
At the same time, the publication suggests that the Hungarian opposition leader is unlikely to meet with high-ranking officials in Kyiv this week, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his team will be attending the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., and as we know, he has already arrived there.